Hey, Black Belt Reads back with the September roundup. So, man, September was an amazing month, truly amazing. I have 5 or 6 books here. They are just incredible. It was such a good month for reading. It was a good month otherwise as well. The last couple of videos I did were horror books because I'm kind of gearing up for the horror season. But there's no horror here. This is just what I read in September. So I've been reading Cormac McCarthy, and I've been reading all of his books in publication order. I'm almost done. All I have left are the 2 most recent books, The Passenger and Stella Maris. And it's been such an amazing journey. He's become pretty much my favorite author of all time. I can't think of anyone I would put above him. Before him, I would have said, maybe Stephen King, and that's just because I've read mostly King books. But I've gotten a little sad because I've read pretty much all of his books now. But I realized that he has some screenplays. So he's got some films that he's done, and then he wrote, the screenplay for them. And they released them as these little tiny volumes. So anyway, I did the Sunset Limited, and yeah, definitely you can tell that McCarthy wrote this. It is very dark. It is okay, so there's only 2 characters in the whole book. So bear with me here. They are called the black and the white. It's a black man and a white man. So a bit odd. It's just he has a very strange style of writing. The black man saves the white man's life. The white man is a intelligent, well-to-do, seemingly professor who tries to jump in front of a train. The train is called the Sunset Limited. And they go back to the black's apartment and just talk about why he tried to do that. The black, tries to help him, not just by saving his life, but he wants to help him further. He feels responsible for him in a way. And they talk about religion, God, life, society, everything. It's just 2 guys in a room talking. That's what the entire thing is, and it was brilliant. Really, really loved it. There's a couple of sort of cheesy moments because it's all dialogue, and that might not be McCarthy's strongest suits. Usually, he excels with the beautiful stream of conscious prose describing scenery, and there's none of that in this book. But what he does excel at here is just his beliefs. The white man does not want to be saved, and the way he goes about it is really fascinating, and I can relate a lot to that because I kind of have similar feelings. But all that to say, I actually just decided to reread another McCarthy book. I guess I'm just procrastinating The Passenger and Stella Maris. I will probably read those this winter. Um, Suttree was probably my favorite book from McCarthy that I read. The 2 that stand out to me the most are Suttree and Blood Meridian. So I decided I would just go ahead and reread them. I'm actually rereading Blood Meridian currently. I'm about halfway through it again. But I did finish Suttree, and I would say this is probably my favorite book from him. I would even go as far as to say it's probably my favorite book of all time. I don't think that it would be everybody's favorite book. I definitely don't. It's a very specific type of book. It's a wanderer, a man wandering the earth, doing his own thing, living as a sort of a vagabond, having drunken escapades. It's a really funny book, really dark. It made me laugh. It made me cry. I mean, this is everything. It has absolutely beautiful prose, some of the most gorgeous writing you will ever read in a book. Also, some of the funniest stuff I've ever read in a book. I mean, it made me laugh out loud several times when Soot's just hanging out drinking whiskey with the boys, or one of the characters in the book, Harrogate. He's just a big doofus. He's so funny. Highly recommend this if you like that sort of thing. Just really relates to me personally. Yeah, probably still my favorite book. But I was trying to maybe not go so dark, and I knew the horror season was coming up. I have a friend that recommended Tom Robbins to me. He said his books are very funny and clever and unique, and he was right. This was a lot of fun. It was just a very strange, and you've got redheads, outlaws, bombs. Oh man, a pack of Camel cigarettes, uh, pyramids, aliens. It's just it's wild. Um, a typewriter. There's so much going on here, but it's like very hard to follow at some points. It feels like Tom Robbins has just got a lot of big ideas and he's just throwing them all at you. But it's a very different book than what I normally would read. It was funny and clever. I think Tom Robbins is clearly a very intelligent um, writer. Not necessarily my favorite, type of book. I tend to prefer dark stuff. I don't know why I am that way. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. I got a lot of people that watch those horror videos, so I think horror is just popular. I've always been drawn to the dark stuff, but every once in a while it's good to throw in something light. And I mean, this does have some dark stuff in it. It's got terrorism. So it's like that's not the kind of dark that I'm talking about, though. But I also, so I actually also did another McCarthy book. I forgot I did The Counselor. Let me throw it up right here somewhere. I didn't like The Counselor as much as Sunset Limited, not nearly as much, actually. When I finished watching the Sunset Limited, I immediately went and watched the movie. It's Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson, and it's beat for beat the book. There might have been very small changes here and there, but it's basically just the screenplay. Anyway, it's great. I think it's on HBO Max if you want to check it out. But The Counselor, I could see what he's trying to do. He's trying to be maybe a little more mainstream, a little more accessible, but it just didn't quite. It's probably my least favorite thing I've read from McCarthy, honestly. But doesn't mean it was bad. Just all his other stuff is just so superb. The Counselor, have you ever heard of a bolito? I think is what it's called. Think of a wire that is attached to um, a wrench and battery powered. When you turn it on, the wire closes. The circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And they put this thing around the guy's neck and turn it on, and you can't take it off. He puts his fingers underneath, and it chops his fingers off. It's really brutal. That's the craziest thing in the book. Really, it had a lot of sex in it, which is not my thing. Really, it's just kind of cringy to me. But the big one I read this month. This is the last one. Um, no, actually, I forgot. Did Atonement. I don't have a copy because I did the audiobook. I didn't know anything about this book. When I went into it, I just knew that it's a popular book. And I think Stephen King said it was one of his favorite books of all time. So that always, kind of makes me interested in something when another author I love recommends a book. I didn't love it. Again, every once in a while, I like to read sort of a literary drama, which is pretty much what this is. It's about a girl who, makes a mistake when she's very young that really kind of ruins the life of two people in her life. And it sort of haunts her. That's why it's called Atonement. I mean, it was okay. I think the first half of the book, I was kind of just dragging through it and not even sure if I wanted to continue at one point. But once it got to maybe the second half, I started to really be invested in the story and interested in where it was going. And I'm glad I stuck it through. It had a good ending. Just, not my favorite type of book necessarily. Maybe doing it audiobook did a little bit of a disservice. Audiobooks are interesting. Sometimes they can hurt the experience, and sometimes they can elevate depending on the narrator. And the narrator was, nothing that stood out to me. For instance, Like, I did Game of Thrones on audiobook. I did the whole Game of Thrones series audiobook, and the guy was amazing. He had different voices for every single character, and just so much energy and such a unique accent, and it just really elevated the story to me. And I probably would love that anyway, just reading it, but the audiobook just made me really, really love that story. Anyway, that was years and years and years ago. I'd like to reread Game of Thrones. It's been so long. Anyway, Atonement. So, the big one that I read, I'm just going to kind of quickly show you East of Eden. I've been wanting to read East of Eden for so long. I really wanted to get it done before October so I could kind of transition into horror novels. That's a weird transition, right? But before I could read East of Eden, I had to read Genesis. So I would just go ahead and say I'm not religious at all, but I do appreciate literature a lot. So I knew that East of Eden was kind of a retelling of the Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve story. Um, so I wanted to just read Genesis, and Genesis is only like 300 pages, but it's like, very short pages. My copy here was like 300 pages, but so like only half the page. The bottom half is like translations and notes and maps and stuff like that. Anyway, Genesis was interesting. I don't believe that stuff is true necessarily, but I just find the stories interesting. But I'm glad I read it because East of Eden definitely played into Genesis a lot. I mean, the main character in this book is Adam, and Adam has two sons, and yeah, so it plays into a lot of that. This is basically just the story of these two families from California and how their lives intersect, and it was so beautifully written. I mean, it's not like McCarthy where you're reading a passage and you're just blown away by the strange words, the big words you have to look up, and you have to read it twice to figure out what he's talking about. Um, Steinbeck's not like that. It's very simple to read. That's not a knock on it. It's beautiful. He has a very simple but elegant way of writing, and I really, really love this. I think the first half of the book, I was just like enraptured, just couldn't stop reading it. And then the second half, I tried to kind of pace myself and slow down. I knew I had plenty of time before October, so you can see I'm posting this before it's even October. But man, I'm so glad I read this. I'd only read a couple of Steinbeck books in the past, and I want to read everything he's written. This was sort of, I guess, between this and Grapes of Wrath were the most popular of his novels. So some people say this is his best book. Some people would say Grapes of Wrath. So really want to read Grapes of Wrath. It's on the shelf back there. But decided to do East of Eden first, just because I mentioned it to a few people in my life. And then about the first week of September, one of the guys came up to me and said, "Hey, did you ever finish East of Eden? I want to talk about it." And I said, "Damn it. No, I have not finished it. I didn't even start it yet." And he's like, "Oh man, I thought you were gonna." And I'm like, "I know. I just have so many books that I want to read all the time, and it's hard to pin things down. But I'm gonna freaking read it. I'm gonna push everything away. I'm gonna read East of Eden." And he's like, "Well, you got to make sure you read Genesis first." So anyway, that's how that happened. So glad I did. So glad he pushed me into reading this when he did. Maybe I was just a little intimidated because it's a pretty big book. I think it's 600 pages. Um, yeah, don't be intimidated. It was very easy to read. I blew through this thing in like a week, easy. Probably should have slowed down a little bit. It was just so good. I couldn't stop reading it. So, anyway, amazing month. But now we're gearing up for the Halloween season for horror novels and my favorite time of the year. So, yeah, September was awesome. If you like this, then please let me know. I love seeing all the comments on the last few videos. Appreciate that so much. And please consider subscribing. Thanks. See ya.